Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Dizzy, and this is my A Song of Ice and Fire recap and review. This is A Game of Thrones, Chapter 3. This is our first of many Daenerys chapters. And right off the bat, I'm not going to lie to y'all, these first few chapters are hard to get through. Daenerys is 13 years old. She has an abusive older brother, and she's basically being brokered to a step lord, a Dothraki Khal, to be his queen, so her brother can get an army to go retake his rightful throne. And Dany is very timid and submissive, which is a stark contrast to how she is later in the books. And it's really hard. She goes through a lot of trauma in these first few chapters, and her brother Viserys is just awful. He is physically and verbally abusive to her and abuses her at will. But the first part of the chapter focuses on Dany receiving her wedding dress, and Viserys is in a very elevated mood. I think he's kind of like bipolar or something like that. He's either ecstatic or he's like abusive and mean. There's just no in between it. He's very much one of the mad Targaryen coin flips. And he is instructing his younger sister to play the part and look beautiful, or she will wake the dragon, as he calls it, and unleash his mean, abusive side. He makes an innuendo towards her, which is suggestive. I'm trying not to use YouTube unfriendly words, and it's really disturbing and creepy. And we learn later in the books that he actually he wants to bed his sister, which is what the Targaryens did. So yes, that sounds extremely screwed up, but note that it is commonplace for Targaryens to brother and sister to keep the bloodline clean. This was actually practiced by like the Habsburgs of old, so it isn't something that's unknown in history. It's just looked on, nowadays it's looked on bad because of like eugenics and all the other stuff, so, and inbreeding. But from Dany's perspective, we learn that Viserys is arrogant, ignorant, and really quite stupid. And you really can't help but feel bad for Dany being in this situation with her brother. She really is nothing more than a pawn to get him his army. And then George goes into quite a bit of backstory about Daenerys and how the Targaryens had to flee their homeland after the usurper won the war, and her older brother Rhaegar. His children were slain by the mountain in a very brutal method. I think at least it talks about the Lannisters. And Dany's mom flees to Dragonstone and dies giving birth to Daenerys. And of course, Viserys blames Dany for their mother's passing, which is, again, just Viserys being stupid and ignorant, shocker, and holds a grudge against her for it. But they essentially had to flee from Dragonstone after Robert the Usurper took over, and they go to Braavos, and Dany stays at the house with the red door and the lemon tree outside of her front window, or her window. And I want to point something out too, because this is brought up later and it's a huge source of controversy. Braavos has like a northern kind of cold, wet climate, and it's very suspect that there be a lemon tree growing in Braavos. So I just want to bring that up. And there's two options. One, that it was brought to Pentos, which is further south, or one of the other free cities. Or George just screwed up with his geography. Note this is like when he was writing this in the early 90s, he might have just had an oversight. He does this a couple of times. Like, from all the fantasy authors, he's like A tier for like depicting economics and like the impact of war and everything else like that, but his geography and climate things don't really work. And I actually have another video of that. Like the way he describes Westeros and the climates doesn't quite pan out, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in some ways. So it might have just been an oversight for him. But going back to the story, Dany is very wistful of the time at the house with the red door. She brings this up constantly, especially early on in the book. She just wants her childhood back, because this is really the only normal part of childhood she has. They have a guardian, a knight that went with them, who's unfortunately dying as he's crossing the Narrow Sea into Braavos, or wherever they went. and getting sicker and sicker and sicker. But while they're at the House of the Red Door, Dany, this is the best time of Dany's life. And really, since then, it's just been a series of mishaps with Viserys having to go from noble to noble, trying to find support and finding less and less as Robert remains on the Iron Throne. So it's just really a traumatic, bad experience. And Viserys, I could only imagine, is getting worse and worse mentally as he's finding less and less people that will willing to help him. And going back to the present, after Dany finishes her rumination, she takes a hot bath, a very hot bath, in a scalding tub it's way too hot for most people. So we kind of learn that Daenerys is very heat resistant, which is very important. A little Easter egg in there, kind of subtly dropped in there. She prepares to meet the Khal, who is... A Khal is basically a play on words of Khan, like Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, or whatever. So the Dothraki are very much based on the Mongols, so I just thought I'd point that out in real life. We then meet Magister Illyrio. He is a grossly obese silk merchant, spice merchant, and slave trader who is basically responsible for setting up the arrangements with the steppe warlord, the Khal Drogo. He is inordinately rich. He is from the free city of Braavos. Or is he from Pentos? I don't think he's from Braavos. I think he's from Pentos. I think I misread that. But anyways, he's a very rich man. He's like a magister of one of the free cities. It's Pentos, I believe. And he has a very jovial and harmless appearance. He's hard to take seriously because he's so obese and jovial. But Daenerys distrusts him deeply. And Viserys just gobbles up all the promises that Illyrio makes because Viserys is kind of an idiot. And he just is constantly like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get my kingdom back. Khal Drogo is going to help me. I don't care that they're a bunch of savages. I'm so excited I'm going to be king again. And like, you can already tell that Viserys would be a horrible king, and he's just full of crap. And he's just all facade. And Daenerys actually secretly holds her brother in contempt, but she doesn't admit this because Daenerys, unfortunately, at this time just sees herself as a pawn. She's very timid. She's just so succumbed to the abuse of her brother that she just doesn't have the voice yet to speak out against him. But she's actually quite intelligent. She's very perceptive, and her mistrusting Illyrio and seeing through his facade is a huge indication of things to come. She's very quick-witted. They enter Khal Drogo's palace in the Free City, and of course, yes, he has a palace because Khal Drogo is a rich slave trader. He is a Dothraki warlord, and he has a place of honor in the Free City, and he can afford a palace there. And this is where he goes and conducts his business. And the Dothraki Khals, of course, are very rich, and they have a lot of gold that they trade. So his palace is just ornately, richly equipped. And Khal Drogo himself, who Daenerys sees for the first time, is this tall man with this very long braid, which means he's undefeated. And initially when she sees him, she's like, oh my gosh, his eyes are cold. He is a murderer and a slave trader. He is not a good person, so to speak. I mean, compared to Ned Stark in the last few chapters, like, Khal Drogo is like a demon from hell. So Daenerys tells Viserys, like, I don't want to marry this guy. He looks awful. He looks terrible. He looks mean. And Viserys basically takes her to the side and cruelly mocks her and pinches her again and says, listen, I want my kingdom back, and you're going to do this. He says, I will literally let the entire Khalasar, or horde, of 40,000 Dothraki take advantage of you if it means getting my kingdom back. So, yeah. Y'all, Viserys is just a piece of work, and you do see glimpses of Daenerys' potential, but it's really quite depressing at times to read these first few chapters. But anyways, now that we're through the first Daenerys chapter, it's all uphill from here on her arc. So, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.